What if I told you that your private messages, browsing history, and even your real-time location are being watched? Not by a hacker, but by the apps you trust the most: Facebook, TikTok, and Google. These companies offer us free services, from endless entertainment to unlimited information. But is it really for free, or are we paying with something else? The short answer is that we are paying with our privacy and personal information. According to allaboutcookies.org, in 2024, the average person was exposed to 177 different trackers every single week. These invisible codes followed users across the internet, quietly feeding data to ad networks, social platforms, and analytics firms. But here's the most terrifying part: most people had no idea it was happening. No warnings, no clear consent, just silent surveillance, disguised as everyday browsing. So, what exactly is a tracker? Trackers are invisible lines of code embedded in websites and apps. You can't see them, you can't hear them, but they're there. The moment you click, scroll, search, or even just land on a page, they activate. These trackers silently collect information about you, what you do, where you go, what devices you're using, and sometimes even who you are. But it doesn't stop there. Most trackers don't just store the data, they send it off to third parties like ad networks, data brokers, marketing firms. And here's the catch: you never gave them your name, your number, your habits, but they built your digital profile of you anyway. They know what you shop for, they know how long you stay up, they know more about your digital life than you probably remember yourself. Imagine walking through a shopping mall. You never speak to anyone, never sign your name, but there's a silent figure behind you, copying every single step you take. They jot down the stores you enter, how long you stay, what you glance at, what you ignore. They even peek into your shopping bags while you're not looking. Now imagine that shadow follows you home, into your living room, onto your couch, watching you, watching what you watch. That's the digital tracker. You don't see it, but it's there, watching, recording, and reporting, all without a word. In this video, we'll break down some of the biggest data privacy scandals in modern history. We'll explore how these tech giants collected and misused user data, apply ethical theories to assess their actions, and discuss how governments and corporate leaders are or aren't stepping up. What is data privacy? Data privacy is the right to control your own personal information, what's collected, how it's used, and who's it's shared with. In the digital age, that includes your name, age, location, photos, contacts, browsing habits, voice recordings, and even biometric data. Every app you use, whether it's a fitness tracker, a weather app, or a shopping site, may be collecting data in the background, and many of them share it or sell it to advertisers, data brokers, and sometimes even governments. But here's the problem: most users don't read the privacy policies. In fact, a Deloitte study found that 91% of people agree to legal terms and services without ever reading them. And that's not because they don't care, it's because the system is designed to overwhelm them. Most privacy policies are thousands of words long, packed with legal jargon, vague language, and intentionally complex clauses. One study even estimated that an average person would take 250 hours to stop and read every policy they encountered a year. That's the equivalent of a full month of full-time work just to understand what you're agreeing to. So people skip it. They click agree and move on. But when you click without reading, you're not giving informed consent. You're just giving them access. And that makes the whole process ethically questionable at best and exploitative at worst. One of the most infamous privacy scandals exploded in 2018, the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica scandal.
This was a major breach of trust, and I'm really sorry that this happened. We have a basic responsibility to protect people's data, and if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to have the opportunity to serve people. So our responsibility now is to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
It all started with a harmless looking personality quiz, an app called This Is Your Digital Life. Just about 270,000 Facebook users installed it, hoping to learn more about themselves through a few questions. But they didn't know that this quiz was more than just fun distraction. It was a gateway. Because of Facebook's API at the time, the app didn't just collect data from 270,000 users, it reached into their friends' profiles too: names, birthdays, location, page likes, private details. In total, the app harvested data from over 87 million unsuspecting users, without their permission and without their knowledge. The data was then handed over to Cambridge Analytica, a shadowy political consulting firm backed by billionaire donors and staffed by behavioral scientists. They weren't running campaigns, they were building psychological blueprints of millions of voters, classifying them by personality type, emotional triggers, fears, and values. With those psychographic profiles in hand, Cambridge Analytica micro-targeted users with a tailor-made political ads designed not to inform but to influence. They knew which voters were anxious, they fed them fear. They knew which voters were angry, they fueled their rage. They didn't change minds, they nudged emotions. This operation played a key role in two of the most controversial political events of the decade: the 2006 US presidential election and the Brexit referendum in the UK. And this wasn't some accidental data spill, it was a deliberate, methodical system that turned Facebook's users' data into political weapons. The scandal came to light when a whistleblower, Christopher Wiley, stepped forward. He described Cambridge Analytica's toolkit as a psychological warfare weapon, built not to serve democracy, but to manipulate it.
Facebook under fire as the whistleblower who exposed a privacy scandal at the social media giant testified before British lawmakers. Christopher Wiley says data from more than 50 million Facebook users was harvested by British consulting firm Cambridge Analytica. During his testimony, he painted a picture of a lawless company that used hacked material, illegal data, and intimidation tactics to win elections, including the 2016 presidential election.
And Facebook? They knew about the misuse. They had been warned, but instead of informing the public, they chose silence until the press exposed what had been happening behind closed doors. TikTok is one of the most downloaded apps in the world, a platform known for its sketchy dances, viral memes, and endless scroll in the form of short videos. With over 1.5 billion users globally, it has become more than just an entertainment app. It's a cultural force. But behind the music and the laughter lies a far more serious concern, and that's less about likes and more about data, surveillance, and national security. TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is headquartered in Beijing, and that matters. Critics, security analysts, and government officials argue that under Chinese law, companies can be compelled to hand over data to the government, including data on foreign nationals. While TikTok has insisted that US user data is stored in servers outside of China, including an Oracle-controlled infrastructure, multiple whistleblowers and former employees have claimed otherwise. They allege that engineers in China have repeatedly accessed sensitive US user data, despite public assurance to the contrary. One international memo reportedly quoted a US-based TikTok employee saying, "Everything is seen in China." In response to growing concerns, the US government banned TikTok from all federal employee devices in 2022, a move echoed by several state governments, but some countries went even further. India, citing national security threats, issued a full ban on TikTok and 58 other Chinese apps, cutting off access entirely. What makes this especially troubling is TikTok's dominant presence among young users. According to industry reports, over 60% of TikTok's global audience is under the age of 24, and the significant portions are minors under 18. This means a platform powered by highly engaging, personalized algorithms is collecting vast amounts of behavioral and biometric data from millions of teenagers, including facial recognition data, voice prompts, location, and more. In the age where data is power and influence can be algorithmically shaped, the stakes go far beyond social media. This isn't just about privacy anymore, it's about sovereignty, accountability, and digital safety of an entire generation. Sovereignty, because if a foreign government can access and influence the thoughts, habits, and emotions of millions of users, especially the youth, the national borders begin to mean less in the digital space. Influence no longer needs to cross borders with troops, it crosses borders with data. Accountability, because companies like TikTok operate in legal gray zones, promising transparency to regulators while allegedly funneling data overseas. The line between platform and propagator becomes dangerously blurred. Who takes responsibility when the data is misused? Who answers when harm is caused? And digital safety, because we're talking about more than tracking clicks and views. We're talking about platforms that collect biometric data, monitoring screen time, habits, and feed highly personalized content to impressionable minds. Sometimes content that reinforces anxiety, insecurity, or addiction. If that data is mishandled, or worse, weaponized, it's not just privacy breach, it's a threat to mental health, to democratic discourse, and to the future autonomy of the next generation. In a world where data is power, protecting that data isn't optional. It's an ethical obligation. In 2019, an investigation by the Associated Press uncovered a disturbing truth about Google, a company trusted by billions around the world. Despite users turning off their location history, Google was still quietly tracking their movement. Through apps like Google Maps, Search, and even background services, the company continued collecting precise location data, logging users' whereabouts down to the minute. For example, a user might disable location tracking to preserve their privacy, only to find out that every time they searched for a restaurant, received weather updates, or opened a news app, Google was still recording their coordinates. This wasn't just a technical oversight, it was a systemic pattern of misleading design, one that gave users the illusion of control while keeping data collection running in the background. The consequences weren't just reputational. Google was hit with a £150 million fine by France's Data Protection Authority for violating the General Data Protection Regulation (GDPR), a powerful privacy law designed to protect users' rights across the European Union. Regulators found that Google's language around data settings was unclear and deceptive, failing to provide users with a genuine choice. But beyond this fine, the case revealed a deeper ethical problem. If users are misled into thinking that their data isn't being collected, when it clearly is, then any consent they give becomes meaningless. True consent requires understanding, it requires transparency, and if a company profits by exploiting what users don't know, then the issue isn't just technical, it's moral. Because privacy settings shouldn't be traps, they should be tools of empowerment. And when companies design them to confuse rather than to inform, they're not protecting users, they're exploiting them. These scandals show a pattern, not just of privacy violations, but of ethical failures. So, how do we assess these actions? Let's break them down using three major ethical frameworks: utilitarianism, deontology, and virtue ethics. Let's begin with utilitarianism, one of the most influential ethical theories in the world. Developed by philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, utilitarianism is a simple principle that is profound in implication. An action is morally right if it produces a greater good for the greatest number. It's about consequences, outcomes, and results, not the intention behind an action, but the net impact it has on everyone affected. In this view, ethics becomes a math problem. Add up the happiness, subtract the harm, and see which one yields the highest benefit for society as a whole. On the surface, companies like Facebook, Google, and TikTok might argue that their actions pass the test. They offer free services used by billions. They connect families, enable small businesses, share knowledge, and entertain the world. Isn't that a form of collective good? Doesn't that benefit outweigh the little background data collection? But utilitarianism doesn't just ask how many benefit, it also asks at what cost and to whom. When Facebook allowed user data to be harvested for political manipulation, did the free services justify the erosion of democratic trust? When TikTok collected data from minors and exposed it for foreign influence, did entertainment for the masses justify surveillance of children? When Google misled users about location tracking, did the usefulness of maps justify the loss of individual agency? Under true utilitarian lens, the equation begins to shift because the benefits, convenience, connections, access don't erase the harms. And those harms aren't abstract, they're measurable, tangible. For example, misinformation that swayed elections, anxiety and addiction reinforced by endless algorithmic feeds, privacy violations that normalize surveillance as a price of participation. So ask yourself, when millions are misled, monitored, and manipulated, is that the greatest good? Or is it the greatest harm, dressed as convenience? Just some food for thought. While utilitarianism focuses on outcomes, the ontology flips the script. It's not about what happens after the decision, it's about the decision itself. Founded by philosopher Immanuel Kant, the ontology teaches that certain actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of their consequences. In Kant's words, act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always as an end, never merely as a mean. In simple terms, don't use people, don't deceive them, don't exploit them, or manipulate them. Even if the end result is positive, ethics under the ontology is about respect, autonomy, and duty. And when we apply this lens to the scandals we've explored, the ethical violations become crystal clear. Facebook users were not told about their data, and their friends' data was being harvested for political profiling. They weren't given a choice. They weren't informed, they were used. And under the ontology, that alone makes Facebook's actions morally indefensible. Even if the platform connected people, even if the ads worked, because consent was never truly given. TikTok's vague data policies and the alleged access by Chinese engineers raise an even more serious issue. Users, many of them minors, were not told who might be able to access their personal data. There is no way to make an informed decision when transparency is missing. And in Kantian ethics, intentional deceptions or omission of the truth is a violation of moral duty. Google allowed users to turn off location history, then continue tracking them through other services. That's not just misleading, that's a betrayal of trust. From a deontological standpoint, misleading users is wrong, even if the data improves services, because morality isn't a matter of utility, it's a matter of integrity. Under deontology, these companies fail to uphold one simple universal ethical law: treat people with respect, not as data points, not as test subjects, and not as means to an end, but as autonomous individuals who have the right to know, the right to choose. The last lens we'll use is virtue ethics, a framework that shifts the focus away from rules or results and asks a much deeper question. What kind of person, or in this case company, are you becoming through your choices? Rooted in the philosophy of Aristotle, virtue ethics teaches that ethical behavior isn't just about action, it's about a character. A virtuous person is someone who strives to cultivate moral qualities like honesty, courage, integrity, justice, and wisdom. And by practicing these virtues consistently, they become the foundation of how we act, decide, and lead. That same the same applies to organizations, because companies, especially tech giants with global influence, don't just offer services, they shape society. They set a tone for what's normal, what's acceptable, and what's right. So when we look at these scandals through the lens of virtue ethics, we're not just asking what they did, we're asking what they revealed. Facebook's handling of users' data wasn't just a policy failure, it was a character failure. The company knew that users' data has been misused. They knew trust has been violated, but they stayed quiet. In that silence, Facebook revealed a culture that valued profits over honesty, influence over accountability, and damage control over moral responsibility. A virtuous company would have stepped forward, would have protected its users. Facebook, it chose self-preservation. TikTok's global popularity gave it an opportunity to lead, especially in setting a higher standard for youth data protection. But instead, the company has been accused of evasion, half-truths, and misleading promises. Virtue ethics would ask, is this a company acting with courage, with transparency, with a genuine commitment to the safety of its users, especially minors? And the answer so far has not been reassuring. Google, a company that claims to organize the world's information, designs its location setting in a way that obscures the truth rather than revealing it. A company that prides itself on intelligence should have no trouble being clear, honest, and user-focused, but instead, it blurs the lines. Under virtue ethics, this reflects a lack of clear morality, a failure to embody the very values it claims to promote: accessibility, openness, and respect. Virtue ethics reminds us that ethical behaviors isn't a one-time decision, it's a habit of a being. These companies had a chance to act with virtue, not to be just, not just compliant, to be courageous, not just cautious, to be good, not just great with what they do. And when companies repeatedly fail to cultivate moral character, the result isn't just bad decision, it's a dangerous cultural influence. The rise of data protection laws, a global fight for digital rights. For years, the digital world has been a legal Wild West. Data was collected, sold, and exploited with little oversight and even less accountability. But that's beginning to change. Around the world, governments are starting to fight back, crafting legislations to defend the rights of citizens in the age of mass surveillance and algorithmic influence. In 2018, the European Union launched the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR for short, a sweeping data privacy law that reshaped the tech landscape. Under GDPR, users now have the legal right to know what data is being collected about them, access and correct that data, and even demand its deletion. GDPR doesn't just make privacy a preference, it makes it a right, enforced by heavy fines. And for the first time, companies had to confront the reality that if they mishandle personal data, they'll pay, not just financially, but reputationally. Across the Atlantic, the US response began at the state level. In 2020, California introduced the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA for short. It gives Californians the power to see what personal data companies hold, know if that data is being sold, most importantly, opt out of the sale altogether. In a country where data is the backbone of trillion-dollar tech empires, CCPA was a warning shot, proof that privacy regulations was no longer a European issue, it was an American one too. In the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates introduced its first Personal Data Protection Law in 2021. Nation's first federal framework focused on digital rights. It aims to align the UAE with global privacy standards and build a consistent and transparent approach to how data is processed, transferred, and stored outside the Emirates. In a region rapidly embracing smart cities, AI, and digital infrastructure, PDPL is an essential step, a recognition that innovation must be matched by protection. But while these laws represent real progress, the battle is far from over. Because big tech doesn't operate within borders, it's global. It moves faster than lawmakers and it thrives in gray zones. Regulations vary from country to country. Definition of consent, privacy, and accountability shifts across jurisdiction. And legal loopholes are everywhere, built into the fine print, buried in the settings, or simply ignored until someone blows the whistle. And so the question remains, can the law keep up with the code? And if they can't, who really protects our data? In every one of these scandals, it wasn't the platform themselves that stepped up. It was the people from inside who spoke out. Christopher Wylie revealed how Cambridge Analytica used Facebook design to manipulate elections. Frances Haugen exposed how Facebook knew its algorithm harmed teenagers and chose not to act. These whistleblowers were brave, but in an ethical system, they shouldn't have to be. Because true ethical leadership doesn't wait for a leak, it doesn't hide behind legal loopholes or PR teams. It anticipates harm, protects users, and makes the hard choices, even when they threaten profits. So where do we go from here? How do we build a digital future that values integrity as much as innovation? We start by fixing the system, not just the symptoms. So first of all, we need stronger international laws that close jurisdictional gaps and hold companies accountable regardless of where they operate. Second, we need clear, transparent privacy policies that regular people can actually understand without a law degree. Thirdly, we need ethics training for engineers and executives, so decisions aren't guided just by ROI, but by responsibility. Fourth, we need privacy by design, where protecting users isn't an afterthought, it's the blueprint from day one. And lastly, and above all, public awareness, because the more we know, the harder we are to manipulate. You don't need to be a lawyer or a coder to reclaim your digital agency. Review your privacy settings, disable unnecessary permissions. Use encrypted browsers like Brave or DuckDuckGo. Be cautious about what you share and support platforms that prioritize ethics, not exploitations. Because ethical changes doesn't just happen in the boardrooms or courtrooms. It starts with awareness, it grows with action, and it lives within the choices we make every time we go online. Privacy isn't just a tech issue, it's a human right issue, and it's time we treat it that way. We have the power to demand change as users, as voters, as leaders. We deserve technology that serves us, not the other way around.